What is up, YouTube? Back in the garage once again. Today was kind of a weird one. Case halves are together. Crank is in. Not glued yet, so this is just temporary mock-up. I've been trying to figure out a bunch of stuff. The video you're going to see is the crank install. I don't have the Jim's tool, to the one that bolts onto the crank, and basically you just thread it down and it pulls the crank into the bearing. I have it about 3/4 of the way right now. A tool, shit, I think my cost is like 180 bucks. I can't really justify that. Now, I'm not opposed to spending good money on tools that I'm going to use regularly, and at this juncture, it would have probably been my fourth set of cases, fourth or fifth Ironhead cases to go through and do that. So, probably should have bought it, but right now I'm on a time crunch and really just want to start putting this back together and build up the rest of the motor, because everything else is sitting on that shelf or in that box. I know there's still a ton of cleanup and polishing and de-sooting and ash removal to do, but that's where we're at. So I didn't have the tool. I ended up using the press to kind of get it 3/4 of the way. It's not fully seated. I know that. There's a little bit of slop in the bearing that I need to go away. So what I did do was fab up some tools. Stopped by my buddy's shop and used his lathe today and turned down, I posted a video a little while back about the shaving fork lowers. Well, I shaved down everything else except for one little tab that I need for the mechanical brake on this mini drum that I'm going to run. Also coated the trees today, uppers and lowers, and I coated the lower fork sliders, kind of. They're not done, but I got the base coat done on that. They're pretty rippled, in all honesty. They're far from perfect. If I don't like it, I definitely need to spend more time sanding those down. Turn them down on the lathe. The dual caliper narrow glide front end has a ton of casting squared off sections that aren't at all round. It's not like the early ones where it was single disc, or even the early drums where they were actually a round tube. There's just so many flat spots. Trying to shave them and make it look clean is very, very difficult. But this is the intro, so we'll rewind and you can watch me try and figure out how to press the cases in, do the case bearings, and all the other miscellaneous crap on the bottom end. Getting closer, one day closer. I know it's not actually glued, but it's closer than it was, so that counts. Then I might end that one with this tool setup, if it works. If not, this will be a second video. I don't know. I gotta find the compensator sprocket nut. I don't know if Ironheads even have that, but I need the nut for here. This costs about, I don't know, $2 in scrap metal. If it works, you'll see. If it doesn't work, you'll also see. So, catch you guys in a bit. Well, it's a bright and early day over at the shop. It's about 7 a.m., so I don't have a ton of time today, but I do have the morning available. Camside case that I didn't have the right tap. Just went through and re-tapped this. So I got this threaded and ready to insert the helicoil. Let me turn you guys around. We'll finish this case up. So here's the tap for the oversize. This threads in nice now. That is the first part of the project. This will go in. Like so. And I'll take my punch. Like that. Now the only other thing I'm going to do on all of these that I've done the helicoils on is I'm going to take a, why am I blanking? Countersink bit and just bevel the edges of these so we got a nice smooth transition from what we just tapped. But other than that, this case is done and ready to go. Cleaned out the inner cavity, blew through the threaded areas, so we should be perfectly fine there now. The only other thing is the breather screen. Not breather, but the filter screen. Before that, we got a gasket. A new pin. And a new screen. gasket goes down. Now, all we got to do is align this pin with the hole. Like so. Pin drops in. Just like that. When you put the cam cover on, that's going to hold this pin in place. But now we get a fresh screen in there. This case is officially done. Now we're on to the fun part for the end of the Timken bearing install. This one's a little bit goofy because there's multiple pieces and they all have to be put in order. So we will start essentially. I'll lay it out before we actually assemble everything. Unlubed bearing for right now. I will put assembly lube on this beforehand, but we have spacer that's going to drop in here on the bottom side of this. So this will basically sit here. If I put it in now, this rides in between the two Timken bearings. These are a matched set, so do not separate these, but essentially spacer will go in on top of the crankshaft. This bearing will drop in like so. This seal will get pressed in. This seal goes on the inside. And if you take a look at these parts, directionally, it's got a couple little notches around here. Oh, if I put the bearing in, this doesn't really fit through here. On this side, or on this, it just kind of floats. If you drop it on the inside, it's machined for that bearing. So there's a little step shoulder in here that catches on the upper section of the bearing, so this will sit just like this. Then we get our spacer into the race on this side, oilers in the middle, and the other bearing will press onto the other side. So in order to do all of this, I'm going to lube up the bearing, drop this in, get the seal in, and then the spacer will go in when I put it on the crank. So I'll lube the bearing first. Using Lucas today because I had an extra one at the house. Get nice and sticky here. Now the compressor's on today, and this is why I hate filming at the shop, but bearing is lubed up, loaded on the inside and out. No air gaps in between the races. I can go right in there. I'm gonna wipe my hands off, clean myself up, then we'll press this seal in. We are back at the press. This aluminum piece that I got here, just bar stock aluminum. Pretty close. It's a little on the big side, but it will work to get this down. Then I'll shrink down to a smaller size that fits a little bit better. I want to make sure this is supported well on the press. Now I gotta swap this out for a smaller driver. Okay, so the only other thing I didn't mention is there's little teeth on the bottom of this spacer. Basically what I do is line that up with the oil passage. So there's a couple notches on the bottom. I did line one of those up with the oil. I think it's the drain. Not positive off the top of my head. So this is lined up to that passage, so when this gets pressed down, it won't be blocking that off. Alright, so I got an 1 5/16" socket. It should fit just on the inside of this. We'll go slow. I got the aluminum piece in here as a spacer. It does fit inside the groove. I'll have to wiggle this around. Like I said, I knew that was going to be a tight fit, but let me pop this socket out. I like to shoot some assembly lube down in the rods right now too, just while I have access to it out of the bike. Make a big oily mess of everything. I did not split the flywheels on this motor, but I didn't think it was really necessary. Get a little on the out. Didn't split the crank because everything on this felt good, and I did have this motor running before doing any of the assembly. Now we're going to lube up this bearing. An excessive amount of lube, but I didn't lube it first, so. Alright, spacer. That's going to go in first just so I know I'm not going to forget it. And we take the crank, bring this over. One of the reasons I wanted to use the press is because it has a through hole. So essentially, rods are here, everything else is set up on there. Now this is where the tool would really be handy. Basically the tool threads on to the other side of the crank, bottoms out on the case, and pulls the crank into it. I don't have that luxury. It's not ideal to put downforce on the actual crank at all. But I'm hoping that this will work if we're gentle. If this is totally wrong and people are getting pissed, that's fine. But I don't have the tool, nor do I have the patience to wait on another order. So what I'm going to try and do is just get this slightly seated. I'm not going to push down on this like crazy. I'm not using the pin because that's offset. I want to push this right along the crank pin area. I could also throw this oven in the case and this crank would drop right on too. So if this doesn't kind of square up and go in well, I'll just throw the case in the oven. But when I'm pushing on the crank pin, it's a lot better than trying to push on here, because if I push here, it's offset and it'll distort the flywheel balance. Still got to get in here a little bit more. Alright, well, we're going to call it good on that for now. Okay, so I got the crank in, I didn't put the seal in. I still got to pull this in all the way. I really don't want to push it on the press because that's not proper. But, like I said, I just kind of snugged it down so it at least stays in place. I might try running over to my indie shop and borrow his sprocket shaft tool and do that real quick until I get my own. Like I said, I'm not opposed to buying the right tools. It's just a matter of cost and time at this point because I need to start slapping this thing back together. Either way, that's where we're going to leave off for now. Still a little bit more oiling and assembly lube stuff prep on the other case, but we're pretty close to being ready to drop this in together. This is the primary sprocket, front sprocket nut. I don't have any of the sprocket gear stuff in. Now, the Jim's tool threads onto here. It's got a big boss that rides the outside, and basically when you tighten this down, it pulls the crank into the case. That's what I have to duplicate. I did post a video when I was installing this prior. I did use a press. Not the best way to go about doing it because it could throw off the flywheel trueness, right? Like once you start pressing. So in the video, I did press on the crank pin itself, which is where the crank pivots. If you go to the far outside, much more likely to squish, right? If this is the point where they're touching and I push over here, good chance of bending that. If I push on top of the crank pin where these fingers are, not as much to bend. Still didn't get the crank as far as I needed it to. So what I'm going to try now, and this could be totally wrong, and that's fine. I am going to take the custom crank installer tool that I have, super thick washer, extra plate. In theory, provided, that won't work either. Just realized it. I went too big on the hole here. Maybe I can get lucky if I flip them. Yeah, if I flip them, I should be okay. So in my head, and like I said, you're watching this just as much as I am, if I crank this down with an impact, once we bottom out the threads here, this washer is smaller than the diameter of, I might actually need to grab one bigger washer. If I have one more that can go over the crank, I'd be in much better shape and a little bit more confident about this. What's the worst that could happen? It works or it doesn't work, right? Can't really blame anybody else except for myself in this scenario. But let's see what happens here. Drop everything. Don't cut yourself on the chrome socket that's peeling apart. And we'll try this again on the other side. Okay, so essentially what this little tool does is this rides over the actual case. The bearing just gives me a little bit more height. This threads down to this, and as I tighten this, it pulls the crank up. I have no idea if this is actually going to work, but it's what I came up with earlier today. So now obviously the crank is not fully tightened down, but I think we're seated here. Looks pretty snugged up. Well, I think we're gonna do a rough case mock-up now. Got a bunch of stuff all over the place right now. Crank feels good. I have no oil on the camshaft side, so I still have to separate the case. Then we're going to have to glue it all back together. I don't know, but I think I do want to try bolting the cases down and putting everything back together just to get a better idea of whether or not this is actually going to work. There was some internal case welding as well, so I'm kind of nervous about that one. Not nervous, but it is something I got to kind of watch out for because I don't know if the weld was built up too high to clear the crank. But we at least kind of have it sort of back together. Again, I'm not looking for perfection here right now. There's no bolts in this case. I don't think it really matters. No rubbing, no grinding. I think we're okay. Let's do it. I'm going to blast the other side of this off now because the crank presses into the left side case, the primary side. I'm going to pound the other case off, get that cleaned up. Maybe I'll throw a couple bolts in. Maybe I'll throw 3 or 4 bolts in first, and then if it doesn't make any noise, we'll go from there. Okay, it's been a long time since this case was apart, but I was smarter than I thought I would have been. I labeled and marked everything on a cardboard template over there on the top corner. So that box right there, I actually almost expected that this might be apart for a while. Usually it doesn't happen that way, but sometimes you get lucky. How does it go? Every once in a while, blind squirrel, something. So we'll put these 3 in. Might have flipped these 2. No washers or anything at this juncture. This is not a final assembly scenario, but more of a, let's see what actually might fit or might not fit. There's 3 bolts in. Now we can flip this around, get the other 4. And that should do for now. I'm missing a couple of them. And I don't have the rear motor mount plate torqued down at all. So I need, what do I got here? 1 center pinch bolt down here that I still need. Motor mount will go on and thread these in. But, you guys in here. Despite not having the fancy expensive tool, I'm not saying it's the best way to do it. No grinding, no rubbing. We are good to go on final assembly. If all of this blows up and catastrophically fails after we get it back together, you'll be able to see that too. So stick around. Now I'm going to yank these bolts back out, put them right back in the box, find some glue, and we are going to glue these cases together tonight. All right, so I yanked the case bolts out. Now I can pound this back apart like it wasn't completely just assembled. So I'm using a dead blow. You typically do not want to bang on this front generator like that. Not the greatest thing in the world. Not too hard to break that off there. It's not a strong point of the motor by any means. But if you're gentle and know that, I'm not saying it's the best option at all. I'm specifically telling you not to do it that way. But do as I say, not as I do. I'm also using a dead blow with very light taps, so it gives me a little bit more forgiveness in regards to trying to pound this off. Trying to get this to slide off of the pinion. Okay, I'm very happy with the crank now. Earlier when it was a little loose before I just used that little double sprocket, double steel plate method, it was grinding a little bit on rotation. I wasn't sure if it was hitting some of the welds on the inside of this case because this case has been repaired. What are you going to do? It should be okay now that I'm confident that it's seated. We're ready to brake clean up the cases, wipe all of this down, double check. I will take a file to the edges of these. There's a couple little high spots here. Then we get to, oh crap. I was gonna say, my case sealer, not RTV, but my case sealer has been in my car because I brought that to the shop this morning and forgot about it. So that's gonna have to come up here and warm up for quite a while. It went from 55 degrees less than a week ago to we are now getting 6 to 8 to 12 inches of snow. Who knows what's actually going to happen. Lots of snow in the forecast. They called off for work today, so I had the day off and got to play chopper, which is awesome. But a lot of cleanup to do on this now. I mean, not a lot, but I got to yank that out. I'm going to throw it in the garage, let that warm up. We'll see. This might be a tomorrow morning crank install. Well, the crank's installed, but sealing the cases might be a second video tomorrow. We are pretty much about done here. The tool worked really well. In all honesty, way better than I anticipated. But now, we gotta prep these cases. I don't know if this is actually gonna work tonight or if this is gonna be a tomorrow thing. It's really gonna come down to what the temperature decides. So, all I'm going to do here is wipe down the cases, get all the grime and grease, and break in oil, engine lube, assembly lube rather. I'm going to clean all of that up, give this a quick wipe down, make it clean enough to eat off of. Not that that's saying much in my case, but clean all of these cases up, wipe down all the surfaces, both sides, then we'll do some case sealer and start torquing this down. So I have all the original hardware for this. I have not wire wheeled or cleaned up any of it. The last order I was putting through. Bought a new set of Colony hardware. Had really good luck with Colony stuff in the past. So that means we should be about good to go when it comes time to reassemble all of this. Now, everybody's got a different method for cleaning things. I'll do a spritz on a rag like that, wipe down cases that way. Sometimes, or sometimes I'll directly spray right onto the cases. I got too many parts over here. And I'd like to try and avoid getting chemicals all over fresh powder. I know it is powder coated, so it should hold up. And if it doesn't, that's a bigger issue that I gotta figure out. But when I can avoid it, I like to try to. So, still a little bit of assembly lube in the cases here. I still gotta lube up the cam bearings too. But I think, as of right now, that's where we're going to leave this video for tonight. So thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Tomorrow morning, I'll come back out here. We will throw the cases back together. I just want to let them get hot. I'll leave the garage heater a little bit warmer than usual. Clean up, and the 3-bond sealer, I got a new package of that. My old one didn't have enough to finish the cases, so had a new one, left it in my car because I thought I was going to be throwing these cases together at the shop today. Took longer than I expected. Who would have thunk it? Things take longer than I anticipated. But we will let that warm up tonight. I'll come back out here, leave the garage at 70 tonight, and we will be ready to reseal the cases, drop the other side on. There's nothing fancy. I don't need any press or special tools on that. The bolts will snug that side down. We'll lube up these bearings, get all of that ready to go. Then ideally tomorrow we should have a complete bottom end, and then we can start messing around with all the fun top end stuff and I think it's fun. Not everybody else, but that's where we're at. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all those fun things. Trying to hit that 1,000 mark because I want to be able to sell you guys shirts and other doodads. Who knows? Follow along. Thanks a lot. Catch you next time.